Good morning again. I'm Bob Durkin. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce. We're here today to speak to the second of the two candidates for the 40th Senatorial District in Pennsylvania, which with reapportionment will now encompass a substantial portion of Lackawanna County, which is a major footprint of the Greater Scranton Chamber, though not exclusively, but strongly regionally. And so the Democratic candidate is Jennifer Shukaitis. Jennifer is a native of Monroe County, graduate of East Stroudsburg High School. Jennifer also holds a bachelor's degree in biology from East Stroudsburg University and a master's in anatomy and neurobiology at Colorado State University. Jennifer has worked as a general manager in the retail tourism industry for 16 years and currently works as a medical coding specialist for Lehigh Valley Health Network, which recently expanded its footprint into Lackawanna County. Jennifer serves as Vice Chairwoman and Assistant Secretary of the Stroud Township Board of Supervisors. She also serves on the boards of the Broadhead Watershed Association, the Stroud Regional Open Space and Recreation Commission, and the Act 137 Monroe County Housing Authority Board. Jennifer is an interesting fact here, is the granddaughter of former Monroe County Commissioner Nancy Michael Shukaitis, the first woman ever to serve in that capacity in Monroe County. Yes. So again, as we did with the Republican candidate, we're going to work through a number of different topics, all of which the main topics, generally speaking, have been shared with the candidates in advance. We want to get the depth of Jennifer's understanding, rather than, this isn't about gotcha moment or anything like that. We want to know who you are and how you connect with Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. So let's, before I do that, I'm going to give you an opportunity, any statement or comment.
How long do I have?
As much time as you have.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here at the Chamber of Commerce. It's, I think, an essential part of our community and keeping our businesses connected and supported in a time when it's getting more and more challenging for small businesses to thrive and to continue forward. And just a little bit about my history on an anecdotal level. My family originated by having a farm that was passed down from generation to generation. And in the 60s, the federal government decided to, they had the funding, they were going to put in a dam project, and they were going to dam the Delaware River. The purpose would have been for some nuclear power plants downriver. And at that time, my grandmother, my great-grandfather was in ownership of the land, but my grandparents lived there as well. And they had their children, 3 generations on that farm. And when the project was implemented, it meant that the government would, by eminent domain, take over the properties of many farms up and down the River Valley, and they would be displaced. And when that happened, my family didn't have a choice, as none of them did. But my grandmother noticed when the Civil Corps of Engineers came in and did a boring of the earth, that it wasn't stable, and that if they were to go ahead with that project, it would have been an environmental disaster for the entire region. And so she stood up against that. She went to Congress on her own and testified before Congress against this project. And they asked her, they said, "Who are you here to represent?" And she said in the moment, I'm representing the residents of Monroe County. But in the back of her head, she thought, probably should have an organization behind me when I'm doing this. So she came back, she started a grassroots organization to continue to make sure that this project wasn't going to go forward because it wasn't going to be a positive project. And over the years, she was successful, but it took a lot of time. Going from the 60s, she then ran for Monroe County Commissioner, and she won and served 4 consecutive terms. And she ran for state rep 40 years ago this year. And I'm grateful that she lost, because that meant she had the years after that to not only keep an eye on the Delaware River Valley, which is now preserved thanks to her. The national government was willing to kind of take that project once they realized it was not going to be feasible and convert it into a national recreation area. And so now everybody has the opportunity to enjoy that land. It's open space, it is preserved, it's a benefit for our future generations. and a treasure, really. And in those years, she was able to expose me to culture, to service to community, to, just the incredible life of person that she was, and her just undying work ethic. And I thought she was going to save the world. So I wasn't interested in politics, but I wanted to be near her. I wanted to stay near my home. And so she wanted me to be a doctor. So I did go that route with my education. But when I came down to it, I really wanted to be home. So I came back and I worked in the retail industry. I actually worked in the same business for 24 years. And when the owners were getting ready to kind of transition into retirement, I became the general manager for them. And I experienced the challenges that started to arise in the early 2000s in small business, where, just every year it's just, you have to work harder and harder to get the same results. And when my grandmother declined even further, I realized, well, you know what, somebody else has to kind of take that torch too. So I moved aside from that 7 days a week working in retail to the healthcare industry again, because I had that balance in having a 5 days a week job, where now I have some extra time to give back to my community. And so in running for office to do my part, I was able to become a township supervisor and use my skills in that capacity to learn about budgeting, legislation, appropriation of funds, and, to be able to have that balance of open space in our community and expanding that, but also providing economic development opportunity for businesses. And I believe that all of my experiences in my path and my journey have brought me to a place where I feel confident that I not only have a lot of great ideas, but I have the energy and, the perspective to go to Harrisburg and try to make sure that this is implemented throughout our state so that we have more opportunities at the small business level, and so that our future generations have great things to look forward to as well. Thank you.
Inspiring story. Well, again, this Chamber of Commerce, the largest chamber in Northeast Pennsylvania, 1,500 members, also a diverse chamber. And they're not just a Chamber of Commerce for economic development, workforce development, leadership, small business lending, and everything that sort of fits under the broad package. And so our board and our board members and members of the chamber and the community have a very important perspective from economic development. So with that, I'm going to make it sort of a broad statement of question, saying, what would you do if you are elected in the Senate to help promote economic development and competitiveness, both in Commonwealth and during the
I think the main issue that we have right now is that small businesses are kind of taking on the burden. The larger corporations are not paying their fair share for our infrastructure. They can set up a corporation outside of our state and come in and have their opportunities here and keep their profits and not contribute to the infrastructure to keep us going. And so that burden then is left on us, on smaller businesses. And I think that we need to maybe look at an activity tax as something that isn't just, imposed on one type of business, but that also that levels that playing field for any industry that is here in this area.
So one of the things that we do is try to attract, sustain, and grow businesses. That's our mission. And in the process of working to attract businesses from outside the state, outside the nation, in some cases, into Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, we are in competition with neighboring states. New York, New Jersey, Ohio, and Maryland oftentimes are main competition for whatever business we're trying to talk about. The Commonwealth traditionally has had levels of incentives, but those incentive dollars have gone down. Whereas New York and Ohio, particularly, those big raised all the incentives. How do you feel about the concept of providing incentives for business to the area? What are the thoughts you have in that regard?
I mean, to me, it's a shame that we have to provide incentives, because I think we have such an amazing opportunity for businesses here. I would really rather see us provide the foundation so that they have a good place to be, whether it be, really focus on educating our workforce so that when they come here, they have something to pull from, that we have some childcare in place so that we have the workforce they need, because I think that's a foundation of infrastructure, of roads and bridges, and and the workforce is what is most important. And we can provide incentives, but if we do that, I think on the other side of it, we also do need to make sure that they're coming from the outside, they are contributing back to us as well, and have that balance.
Well, the key word is workforce. With all of our members right now, almost virtually every one of them across the board, expanding workforce opportunities have been there pre-COVID and in some cases accelerated through COVID, particularly in certain sectors. And yet we still are finding ourselves, challenged in having allowing our members or giving our members an opportunity to fill those jobs. So I'd like to ask you, general comments, thoughts on workforce development, and then I'll hit on a couple of specific things.
I think in general, in Pennsylvania, we're not contributing funding to a level that our neighboring states are for K through 12 and for even continuing education, whether it's our state colleges, whether it's our technical institutes. I think we need to implement more focus on that so that people are ready to work and they're kind of, prepared for it. And then probably on the other side of it, I think a lot of our workforce is struggling with trying to raise a family and trying to provide childcare. A lot of single heads of households in our families, and it's a real struggle when the childcare costs are so high. So I think it's really important that we provide some sort of incentives, whether it's a business incentive, so that businesses have the ability to provide childcare, or provide a tax incentive for the parent. But there's got to be a way where we close that gap and make it possible for our workers to have the opportunity to work.
You get another key point there, and that is within the daycare, childcare arena. That's a space that's really challenging to try to fill those positions. In many cases, what we've been told is that individuals, their college degree, maybe in early childhood education, they want to work in that space. They oftentimes go into childcare. There's an incentive for them to go into childcare early on, but as soon as the opportunity presents itself because of the pay scale, they're moving on up. So COVID has really, more than ever, shown light on how that whole trajectory works, and it's showing childcare and the professional elements of that as a weakness, a weak link within the whole effort. Can you speak to that?
I think we're going through a dynamic shift where our pay scale isn't keeping up with inflation, or what the costs of living really are. I think that's where we need to try to help kind of fill that gap a little bit, or provide a step up. That's what I would say.
Because there have been statewide programs in that regard, but unfortunately several changed after they were initiated. There could be support for the professionals. The idea was the prospect of helping them pay for their college education as they were working daycare. And then, unfortunately, the rules changed. Pulled the plug, and the dollar amount frequently reduced, and became a one-time stipend. I think we've been told by a key board member of ours, who runs multiple daycare center, the challenge is you want the best people working, but there's not, the market can't seem to bear that. And individuals, particularly families, can't bear it, and low income certainly can't bear it. And so there needs to be a broad bipartisan view of what has to happen in daycare and childcare. That's something that we as an organization have put that on near the top of our list of legislative priorities. A couple of other things that we've learned, because we run, in addition to the chamber and our other affiliates, amongst our affiliates, is Skills in Scranton, which is our workforce development program. In the last several years, under the leadership of Jerry Mushnow, our chair-elect, we've taken some actions to try to promote among our business members the prospect of broaden their hiring thought process to include individuals of different constituencies, different cultural constituencies, individuals who are veterans, disabled, those who are previously incarcerated, people who have been displaced. The idea being that for as employers, we have to pay attention to the broadest suite that we're finding. The question I would have is, what are your thoughts on that in general, and how do you think this, you were in the Senate, you might be able to make a difference in that regard?
I mean, that's really in line with something I'd love to work on, because when we look at who's being left behind, it is some of those, it's some of the veterans, it's people that really didn't have those opportunities to go to continuing education. And when I think also at a basic level, when we have students in school, I'd really like to see programming that assesses our students at a young age, guides them through based on their skills, based on their interests, so that from a young age, they're kind of guided to a direction where that's, the occupation that they might want to be in as an adult, prepare them sooner and maybe more focused, so that we don't have students getting into, maybe they're going to college, but they wanted to be an electrician, or, maybe they go to college for one degree and then they flip and decide on something else. I think that if we can provide that support at a younger age, they will be more prepared as adults to work in the workforces that we need them to be in. Be prepared for, the industries being filling those jobs, and then they would be more productive as adults as well. But right now, we have so many people that are not trained for what probably is their purpose or what is their greatest potential. So if we can fill that gap right now by providing some resources across diversity, across economic status, everything, I think that we will, that is the way that's what I love, is it's really about fixing problems at the core, not patching. And I think that is one way to do it.
One of the other barriers consistently for many of our businesses is access to public transportation. Commonwealth has a key role in this because they're about public transportation, in this case, Coles, serving Lackawanna County, gets subsidies both from the federal government, the county government, but also the state. And that state subsidy has been a challenge over the last number of years. Your thoughts on how public transportation might be supported by someone sitting in the position?
Well, one of the ways is to put more funding into it. I do, thinking about the train, I know that's just one little aspect and one specific route, but we have the federal funding now. We have Matt Cartwright, who has been working on that for a while, and we need the state and the municipalities to also join in that effort to make that a reality. But in Monroe County, for example, we have a transit system, but it is a little sporadic. It needs funding, needs expansion. And so these are things that the state needs to come in and assess and help really focus on, especially in the rural areas. And not one as well.
That sort of speaks to an issue that we have talked about in general. The Chamber just completed a major strategic planning process, and one of the key cross-cutting elements we talked about strategic partnerships. And so, second, you're stealing the thunder on training. But one of the things that perhaps we are thinking about it, and we are as a Chamber of Commerce. We work very closely with the other chambers, the economic development organizations. In a position like this senatorial position, we were talking about part or all 3 different counties, and connecting up with particularly Lackawanna County, where there's, has been traditionally another senator. So you have to deal with that as well. Can you speak to the regional concept of that may or may not apply to transportation? How you think you might be able to pull things together in your role as a senator to help people work together on these places?
Well, no, I mean, there's part of me that's data driven, and I like to look at it as a region and see we have, Monroe County is generally tourist hospitality based, and we have Wayne County, part of Wayne County that is agriculture based and tourist based, and then Lackawanna where we have industry service and professional services. And so we can look at it as a whole, but we really need to break it down into its components and make sure that everything is being addressed the way it needs to be. And for me, I'm I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to be working with Mark Flynn to continue, that unified front in addressing the issues in Lackawanna County. And, have being born and raised in Monroe County, I'm really aware of, the different opportunities that exist that we can help focus on there as well. So I think it's going to be we have to look at it overall, at the overall picture, but we also need to break it down and really help everybody at an individual level.
As far as the Commonwealth being able to make an impact on sticking it back to the workforce here, the whole notion of supporting our employers and supporting employees where appropriate. One of the things that we've encountered through skilled grants and our working relationship with the Lackawanna County Workforce Development Board is we're unique in Lackawanna County in that we have a county-based Workforce Development Board. Most counties have 5 county donors. And yet, what we find is the money that comes to support businesses, which comes from the federal government, state government, with workforce boards, and then ultimately how the community have so many strings attached. There are so many requirements that very often, an employer may be in a situation where they need to fill a position, they have somebody who might fit the economic development or the socioeconomic status of one of these programs, but the rest of the red tape that's associated with it makes it a disincentive for the company to say, I can't even get the time to do this. Can you speak to me in general about how we might take a lead position?
Yeah, I mean, I witnessed the struggles that organizations and businesses go through in trying to obtain grant funding. But I also see duplication in some of our organizations as we all try to, we try to fill the gaps, and there's people that have the same missions and the same interests in solving problems in our communities. So they're working really hard, but somebody else is doing the same thing. And so I would love to see more efficiency where we are somehow coordinating our organizations and our development so that we can not only make it easier for them to get the funds they need to be effective, but we can also bring them together so that we are not duplicating our efforts. It's energy. To me, it's an energy, and I believe in competition as far as business goes, but when I'm talking about like charity organizations and resource organizations, I think that there's more that we can do to help facilitate them getting the funding that they need to be successful and maybe even bringing them together as well.
So, for example, everybody could ask the Chamber of Commerce what they do.
Having an agency like the Chamber, I think would be, really good idea.
Well, and again, part of our strategic planning and our actually the implementation of our program is really strong efforts on regional, and it really comes to really underscore what you said, to eliminate duplication, make sure that everybody's, those of us who are at a common interest work together. And our pledge is through our strategic planning process and our program work is to do that. We're not always perfect at it, but we try to do it when we can. So let me come back to the references before. I mentioned it in the previous interview. This is the underhand softball toss Amtrak service expansion in New York City. Clearly, we are strong proponents of this. Ask me your comments.
Well, I will say yes. I know they've been talking about it since I was born. But
before you were born.
Well, no, I'm 46, so around the time I was born. But I actually ran for county office in Monroe County 5 years ago, and I lost that seat by 180 votes, which I shouldn't talk about, but it was so close. And I was actually glad I didn't win that seat. It was the county treasurer position. And in the process of going door to door all year long and speaking to the residents, I realized through that process that as a county treasurer, I can't really address their needs. I can't really help them. And so when I lost that race in November, I remember feeling not just shock, but also relief, because I thought, oh, maybe there's something else meant for me. And the very next morning, Matt Cartwright called, and he said, keep it up, keep positive, something else is coming your way, don't stop. And I said back to him, out of nowhere, if you need any help getting the train going, let me know. So this has been in my mind for quite a while, not even having any ability to do anything about it. So to have the opportunity to represent my district and to be able to bring the train back to us in a way that it provides opportunity, provides economy, I just think it's a wonderful thing.
The Commonwealth will have a role, does have a role in this event. All of these runs, with the exception of the one in Boston, see, they're all money with the potential. So there needs to be a subsidy on it. That applies to the current train runs in Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. The challenge in this role would be making sure that PennDOT supports what we do. And thoughts on what you might do and how you do that.
I'm not in the legislature right now. I think that our PennDOT workers do a great job, and I think that at the organizational level, I'd like to see a little bit of changes so that PennDOT can be a little more responsive, a little more, interactive, and so that we can, be more effective in how we work together.
There's also the distribution of dollars to the local share account. The funds that are generated through Monterey Casino, distributed purchase, predominantly from Monroe County and all cases. So Lackawanna County, also the beneficiary, generally to the tune of about $2.5 million a year. There are opportunities to use those dollars in a number of different ways. And the way the elected officials, senators, and representatives have a strong say on how dollars are used. The Chamber of Commerce perspective, and I'm not trying to be unique in saying this, but the original concept of LSA was economic development predominantly, and to a lesser degree, community development uses. You see it go in a different direction. We'd like to see more of those dollars. It would be discipline, right? It would be discipline. Comment on that?
I mean, my priority would be infrastructure, but I would also be definitely, I agree with you, economic development is important. Infrastructure is part of that. I would take I really approach things with a return on investment approach. What are these dollars going to be for us down the line in the future to make our community stronger and safer and more prosperous? And so I would like to analyze it that way and make sure that our dollars are put toward things that are going to really help us, and make great impact going forward.
You're looking at my notes?
No.
So let me go with that. I mentioned before we have legislative priorities that are reviewed by our Government Affairs Committee, approved by our board. Almost always, you're at the top of that in infrastructure improvement. There's a lot of federal money available right now. It's coming to the federal infrastructure bill. It's coming to the Commonwealth. I think we had representatives at the governor's office in about a month ago to talk about the various programs. We're going to be having those different programs, right? We would want to be able to tackle use those dollars as effectively as possible here. Can I speak to that in general in terms of starting in terms of the obvious infrastructure issues, roads and bridges, and the like?
So I'll kind of start where I came from. As a township supervisor, I served 20,000 residents, and we pave our roads and we take care of our bridges in a very effective manner. We haven't raised our tax in 10 years by a penny. So there's a way that we need to look at it from, a responsible standpoint and making a plan going forward. And in looking at that, we have these dollars already. So we know now what we can focus on. And I think this is an amazing opportunity to use those dollars where they are needed most. We know we need to expand broadband. We need to make sure that our roads and bridges are maintained. And there's also improvements that need to be made across the board. So I'm really excited about this opportunity, something that I really love to focus on.
We touched on broadband, and we've been working with Lackawanna County on an application enhanced broadband throughout Clinton County. COVID really, shown a lot of different lights and different spaces, weaknesses in our local economy and our education system. And part of what they're talking about, what we do with increase the capacity for opportunity for access to broadband within school districts, but also really the most focused on small businesses and their commitment. One of the other things that we determined or found from this whole process is that the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, very often, in fact, from the federal broadband standpoint, would look at maps that they have of where broadband is weak. And unfortunately, it is a definition that is brought forth directly by the companies themselves. Think of all the brand name national telephone and broadband companies. They're the ones saying where broadband exists and where it's strong, where it's weak. Whereas the Commonwealth has found out in Penn State, a study done by Penn State, that those maps they're not good. So the question becomes, how do we tell the people and the senator how those pipelines do take to the federal government and or the state to make sure that areas of Monroe County, Wayne County, particularly rural areas of Lackawanna County, are served better than the rest?
I mean, we may need to take a look at it from every level. I know that in Monroe County, our county level has been working on broadband already, doing assessments to figure out where our gaps are. So I think if we can, compare these maps and see, where are the similarities, where are the differences, and why are there differences, and then tackle it in the right way, because it's not just Lackawanna County, it's the entire 40th district that is in need of broadband improvements.
It also connects into the whole notion of talent attraction. We've seen it strongly in Monroe County. We've certainly seen it all throughout Lackawanna County, particularly downtown Scranton, where individuals who are either from this region have decided to move back. We're now working remotely, or others who had connections like the University of Scranton, who decided to take Scranton or Lackawanna County or Monroe County. From a business standpoint, those individuals as a step of talent attraction. Some of these people can come to Northeastern Pennsylvania, still work, at least temporarily, in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Baltimore. The goal of demonstrating to them that we have greater capacity for business development and entrepreneurship. Thoughts on that and how that might impact entrepreneurship?
Oh, yeah, tremendously. I mean, even just, I work remotely from home. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're someone who is working for another company or organization, I think it's important that there's this opportunity for everyone to be able to have a job, be able to communicate. I mean, that's one of the dangers in Monroe County. The gaps are providing places where even our emergency services can't keep from. So from every perspective, this is an important issue.
How might you, what the steps might you take to local governments access infrastructure? Because one of the challenges we've seen in feeling communities that have received American Rescue Plan dollars, the RPA dollars, are reluctant to spend the dollar, concerned if they spend it the wrong way, they'll have to repay it. Likewise, the federal sustained infrastructure dollars all have, rules, regulations, and strings attached to the thing. And so when we had the gentleman from the Commonwealth, Jack Burke, the Deputy Secretary, one of the things we purposely did was we partnered with Lackawanna County and invited all municipalities to attend. For the most part, the challenge there is they don't have not all the municipalities have professional capacity to be able to vet these things so they're comfortable getting, whether it's roads, bridges, or broadband, or stormwater like that. Any thoughts on what you might do as a senator to help those municipalities?
Yes, in Monroe County, we have the same concerns. The county did bring the municipalities together. We had a conversation. We made a list of, what are the priorities, whether it be on the county level or the municipal levels. Everybody has different needs and gaps to fill. So it becomes complicated because you're looking at all these different levels and what can we do. And yes, some municipalities are small and they can't really afford the consultants to help them out. Now in our county, we had a consulting firm that came in, was really willing to kind of do a group, effort to try to help all of us as a whole, which I think was really nice. But I think really getting everybody together on the same page as far as, you know, what does everybody need? How can we prioritize that and maybe make it so that, for example, broadband is a tremendous expense. It's not something that even the county can handle, but it's something that the state and the county are probably going on together. And so I think we need to use these funds together in a lot of ways to make it the most effective for us. Because I don't know that, you know, we have maybe some individual projects that are really important in certain municipalities that we should definitely, you know, focus on that. But there are some bigger issues too that cross over municipalities, cross over counties, even that I think we could utilize those funds together. And we don't have a lot of time, so it's something that needs to be worked on immediately.
Public education is an important part of Commonwealth's budgetary responsibility. Can you speak to, first of all, the K-12 and how you as a senator would support the school districts in this 40%?
Yeah, so we've had the same funding formula for way too long, and there's parts of our state that benefit from that. So it's time, I think, for some new leadership to come in and kind of shake things up and say, let's hit the reset button. Let's reset this funding formula so that all of our students are equitably funded across the state. And I mean, for example, Carbondale School District per student gets probably the least, one of the least amounts of money per student. And, you know, that shouldn't be happening. Every student across our state should be funded enough to get to have a quality education. That's our job. And so I would really like to see that funding formula changed that would bring down our property taxes as well. I mean, we've heard for so long that they're going to work on this and they're going to bring down property taxes, but nothing's happened. And so it's, I think, time for a new perspective. And I have some ideas on, you know, can we eliminate property taxes for funding schools? No, because that's a consistent form of revenue. But can we add to that with some other forms of revenue? Yeah, we could probably find a few other revenue streams to combine into that, so that would help bring the property taxes down. So I think there's solutions on both sides, but it's something that has been talked about for so long. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I want to help change things and make things better going forward with a reasonable perspective that will benefit people that are right now taking on too much of the burden.
We have a lot of important and valuable higher education institutions here in my home county as well. A number of them, but almost all of them in my county are private at some level, with the exception of Penn State School. One of the areas that is sort of the equalizer on the fact that the state supports the state system and the Penn State Temple separately. But we also, because we count on the strength of our private higher education institutions, the issue of making sure that there's a balance on that. One area is that funding, appropriate funding via the higher education system. Do you have any thoughts on that issue and comment on that?
If you look at neighboring states, we are not funding our higher education at the same level. And so we definitely need to fill in that gap as well. Harder and harder for students to be able to afford education. And I mean, I think part of that too is at a younger level, if we can gear them to the right pathway, that will help make sure they're on the right path so they're not paying for an education that might not benefit them in the end. But on the other side of it, we want to give them that opportunity to have that education that will make them productive. So that's definitely going to be an investment on our part.
They take you to sort of the politics of Harrisburg, and maybe not necessarily everybody's favorite part of the whole process, but it's the reality. The concept that I refer to as civil discourse, the way that things are actually being played out in Harrisburg. Can you speak to your thoughts are on how that is and how you might address that?
Well, when we look at the procedural level of Harrisburg right now, it's about 7% of legislation and bills that make it out of committees that are even considered. And so from my perspective, things are not moving in Harrisburg right now. We're not even considering bipartisan bills that really deserve that opportunity. We look at that together. So right off the bat, we need to make sure that it's not just a committee chairperson that gets to hold things back. It's a vote. We have a democracy. So I would like to see that change first and foremost. And then as far as, you know, we need to make sure we have leadership that is willing to stand up for us, but also look at things from an analytical perspective and be able to work together, because it's not just, it is about our region. We need to fight for the 40th district, but we also need to fight for all of Pennsylvania at the same time and make sure that we're looking at it from a perspective of the entire state. So we see that, you know, Philadelphia, Allegheny, they have a little more power in Harrisburg. And I think we need to try to maybe smooth that out a little bit and say, you know, it's not just about our big city areas, it's about all of us. I right now work on a bipartisan board. We have a lot of respect for one another. We listen to one another. I think that's really important. Those are when best decisions are made and the best outcomes happen.
The other results of this environment in Harrisburg is that the recent movement towards constitutional amendments, or what would otherwise be seen as legislative activity. Mm-hmm. You want to offer a comment on it?
Yeah, so I have two things to say about that. One is by putting amendments to our Constitution on a ballot, it is one way for our legislators to remove their own responsibility from doing their job for us. And it also removes the foundation of our government, which is a representative democracy. And both things are not good. We should have representatives that represent us, and we hold them accountable to what they're doing. To take away the ability for our balance of government to work the way it's supposed to work is eroding the system of government that our forefathers set up for us. And it is not going to benefit us in the end. We would not want to become this situation where everything we decide on is decided on by just the voters, especially in an environment where people are questioning our electoral process to begin with. So I think that it's in a way a cop-out, but also in a way the erosion of our system of government.
So at this point, I'm going to see if there are any questions from people. Chairman Kelly.
Jennifer, you're making me feel old, but 1 year I graduated high school. Right now, there's $10 billion from federal rescue funding that was dumped in the rainy day fund, which doesn't seem to be really proposed or anticipated use of that money. Honestly, it seems to me like they got a hole in the ground to store it. How would you advocate using that so-called rainy day fund?
That's a good question. So yeah, we have $10 billion in our rainy day fund that wasn't intended to go there. And it's always good to have a rainy day fund, right? We should have some backup, but we got ourselves into a point over the years with our budget where we were behind. And we actually are in debt in our state. And so I think that by taking this route, we're not doing ourselves any service. We need to invest to make things improve going forward, not hide the little bit that we have for what, you know, what is it going to benefit us? We know the challenges that are coming in our future. So we need to prepare for those challenges right now. So that money definitely needs to go toward infrastructure, definitely needs to go toward, you know, preparing for our future economically, for our workforce, for our families. It's stuff that we really can't hold back. I think it's going to hurt us in the long run.
Hi, Don Berginski from UGI. Thank you for your time today. Bob mentioned competing with neighboring states, and I'm going to group New York and New Jersey separate from, let's say, Ohio and West Virginia when it comes to energy and environmental policies, polar opposites. Where do you see Pennsylvania's energy and environmental policies?
So I would really like to see some balance in our policies. I think that if we're going to produce our own energy, that we should not be paying the price for it. If we're going to transport that energy outside of our state to benefit those other states, I mean, this is what we do. We need energy in our world, but we're the only state that doesn't have a severance tax. We don't tax the transport of natural gas outside of our area, and we're the only state that does that. And I think that it's revenue that could really be benefiting us in the long term. As far as, you know, being competitive, we produce, I think, some of the most energy in the country right now. So we have the upper hand. We need to use that.
Thank you.
You talked about making corporations pay their fair share. How do you feel about closing the Delaware loophole? Corporations incorporated in Delaware, where there's little or no taxation on them, but they're actually operating in Pennsylvania. The money's going back to Delaware, and so they can start running benefit from.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think having an activity tax would maybe help with that, offsetting that, because we could change our whole tax base. But I think having an activity a tax would level that playing field and give them some, maybe them contributing to our infrastructure that they're using.
Would you advocate for closing the Delaware loophole, or at least in part?
I would like to. Yeah.
Questions?
One last one.
As a representative of labor, two things that are really important to us are public sector OSHA and preserving the Lions Spirit story. 4,000 good jobs statewide, family sustaining jobs. And the person changing tires at a PennDOT facility is not afforded the same OSHA safety practices as someone changing tires at a private facility. Two issues to report us. Did you speak to one or the other? Or?
I mean, I agree with you on both. I think that OSHA is a fantastic way to implement safety, and it's necessary. I mean, I have experience in seeing at the government level a higher level of injury, and I believe that part of that is lack of training and lack of OSHA standards being implemented. So I think that is something that should be across the board implemented. And for our liquor store system, I think that this is, you know, we are providing a service, we are generating revenue, and we are providing oversight as well in our communities by controlling that sector. And I think that's something that we should lead to.
Bill and I were talking just before you came in about, right now we elect our appellate judges on a statewide basis. There was some talk about maybe we should regionalize that election process. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I don't have an opinion on that at the moment.
Well, we've got a few minutes. If you'd like, any final thoughts and comments?
I really appreciate the time that everyone has given today to listen to me. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve 40th District with this election coming up. I think that something that's really important to me is being able to give back, but also to be a voice for us and to make decisions that are going to benefit us going forward. I have an opponent that is not necessarily voting for our environment, not necessarily voting for to uphold and maintain our rights. And I think that we need to look very closely at what our legislators are doing for us right now and over the past few years and decide what type of leadership it is that we want going forward. Because, you know, our government isn't perfect. But we have infrastructure, we have roads and bridges, we have a workforce education program, we have colleges, because we as people demand it from our representatives and from our government. And we cannot let that fall down. We have to continue to demand those needs be met. And that is something that I truly plan to do.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.